Hi, I'm Naomi Hall, and I want to welcome you to Mindset Makeover, our virtual summit about finding your power through fitness, nutrition, and community. My whole goal in this is that we all kind of know what we should do to live healthy lives, but we really struggle to do those things, or we're doing all the right things and not seeing any progress. So today I have with me Toni Marinucci, and she's the author of what I think is a pretty interesting book. So Toni is a registered dietitian and business owner of Diet Tips with Toni, who ironically teaches people how not to diet. She is also a podcast host, social media influencer, TEDx speaker, and #1 best-selling author of the book Once Upon a Diet, where she discusses the parallels between dieting, dating, and romantic relationships and how we treat them the same. Her team of registered dietitians provide online nutrition coaching to help women break free from the all or nothing mindset and encourage them to embrace balance instead. Her mission is to end restrictive diet culture by providing simple tips to healthy living while incorporating foods you love. So, welcome, Toni.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. I first came across you in a podcast. Someone that I follow was interviewing you when your book came out, and I was like, I love this. Like, I need this book. Unfortunately, I haven't gotten the book yet.
Oh, I gotta send you. Don't buy it. I'll send you a copy.
Awesome. Thank you
Let
so
me,
much.
as a thank you for having me here.
Well,
Yeah,
thank
let me make
you.
sure I write that down because I'll forget.
But I loved the interview and just your perspective on dieting, dating, all of it. So I wanted to have you on so that we could talk about Once Upon a Diet. Like, where did this come from?
Oh, okay. Many years ago, actually not that many, maybe like 5 years ago, I was, I had gotten off a call with a client and I was like really frustrated because I was like glad that she had finally reached out to me for help, but I was kind of thinking in my head, like, she's not alone in that, so many women that I work with like wait for like after they've tried all of the things to finally get like the help that's actually going to help them put an end to the vicious diet cycle. And
Mm.
I kind of like was thinking like, so when do they realize, like, is it after keto? Is it after Weight Watchers? Is it after, the 10-day challenge? Like, it's like all these things that they've done where they're not getting the results they're looking for. And I was like, they're basically following the same diet, just this in a different book. Like, how do they not realize this? And then I like had a moment where at that time I had just gotten out of a serious relationship, which was like my third serious relationship where I basically dated the same guy with a different name and a different face. And, I have a history with my relationship with food and dieting, but that's something I healed many years ago. I've been a dietitian for about 10 years now.
Mhm.
So when it comes to my relationship with food and body, like I kind of understood that there's no one size fits all, before I even decided I wanted to go to school to become a dietitian. I mean, so all that to say, like, I I like basically was comparing myself, but then I was like, wait a minute. First of all, you fell for the same tricks and tips. Second of all, you haven't learned your lesson when it comes to dating. So like, how are we any different? And like, there's so many parallels, right? So like, cause so many of us just so desperately like want it to work. So I make the comparison of like Cinderella's stepsisters, like, the glass slipper, clearly it wasn't a good fit for them, but they like didn't care. They just wanted to try to jam it in and make it work. And so many people are doing that when it comes to like dieting as well. It's like they just want to lose the weight so badly. They don't care how or what. It's just they want to lose it. So if they lost the weight, it quote unquote worked, but they never really stopped to think about the quality of
Mhm.
their relationship with food or their body and all those things. And then I realized that that's what I was doing with dating. Like I just so badly wanted to, because I was teased as a kid for my weight and I was made to feel less than. I so badly just wanted to be in a relationship because I thought that that would meant that I'm somehow worthy and that like I figured it all out, that I didn't really think of like the source of the partner and like the fact that maybe they weren't a good fit for me and all of those things. And that was my first realization, my first parallel. And that's what inspired the TEDx talk, which I went and did probably a year or so later. I think a year later. And then I realized as I was preparing for the TEDx talk that I only had 8 minutes to speak and that there was just so much more to this. And then that's where the
Mhm.
book was born. So Once Upon a Diet started as an idea, it started as a TEDx talk, and then it turned into a book, which now is, it even comes in my writing and my content today.
Wow, that's such a neat progression of like you've had your own healing journey and then you're working with these women and realizing, oh my gosh, they're doing the same thing over and over again. And I see that too. And I've seen it in myself of like, okay, I lost the weight, but then I gained it back. So was it actually successful?
Correct.
It's like if it actually worked, like I shouldn't have to move on to something else. I shouldn't have to try
Correct.
another thing. And then yeah, I can relate to the dating thing. Like like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
same guy.
Yeah.
Different name, different face. Like, yeah,
Mhm.
that's really neat
Mhm.
that like you connected that. And I love that image of Cinderella's stepsisters trying to cram their feet into that shoe. Like we're trying and yeah, I can see that like we do that to ourselves of trying to fit ourselves into somebody else's expectations or somebody else's diet or
100%.
you know
Mhm.
um
Societal standards.
mhm,
Yeah.
yeah, of like what everybody else they so I'm like you can't tell on here, I'm a 6 foot tall woman. I don't meet societal standards from the get go. Like,
Mhm.
I'm not
Mhm.
your typical woman. So I'm never going to look like that of what is like promoted. And so that was a struggle for me too, of like, I was always taller than my friends, always larger than my friends. And I struggled. So just by the nature of being taller, I was already larger. And then
Mhm.
to also struggle with your weight on top of that, yeah, there's so many pressures of things that we're trying to fit into. So how do you work on that? Like where's your starting point?
It's a long progression. But the starting point is to challenge those narratives and to challenge those what, the whole idea that we're all supposed to look the same is that in itself is a bold-faced lie. I
Mm,
think what makes us unique and makes us different is what makes us special. And I think that instead of us trying to change and trying to be something we're not, if we just embrace who we are, you're going to be a whole lot happier. So I usually like to just, especially if there's something you can't change, like your height, you like physically cannot change that. So to be frustrated and upset about it, like that is definitely like not going to lead to anywhere good. And then with our bodies, it's a little different, right? Because technically, we can change the shape of our body, right? Through diet and exercise. However, the extremes in which most people jump to or would even need to go to really change their body, right? So like certain people, certain body shapes and sizes, if they follow a certain eating plan or workout or whatnot, they might be able to reach that quote unquote, when you think of whatever your version of, because beauty is in the eyes of the beholder, whatever your version of like quote unquote perfect body is. There are some people who naturally are really close enough to that shape that if they put in some sort of effort that they can actually get that. Then there are other people like me, where I was always in a bigger body, and when I changed my eating habits, that I was still healthy, but I still didn't quite like fit the mold of what I thought, especially as a registered dietitian, being in the eyes, knowing that people were going to look up to me as an expert. I often got kind of caught in thinking like, I don't know if this is enough because I know I'm healthy and I feel good, but people are going to still look at me as I'm a curvier girl and I'm a bigger girl. And so therefore they're going to think like, how can she help me lose weight? Which I'm not to sidetrack, but I literally got a comment like that one time when I was not working for myself. I was working at a supermarket as their dietitian. And I had somebody come in and say, "You're overweight yourself. How are you going to teach me how to lose weight?" So when you have like these thoughts, and then you're literally told them at the same time, and then you were teased as a kid and told you're never going to be enough and no boy's ever going to like you because of your body size, and now people are saying it to you, it could obviously be really triggering, right? And it can be
mhm,
really complicated. And then therefore you want to try to challenge that and you want to fix that. But the reality is like I had to get to a point where I tried so hard to be the quote unquote like perfect shape and size where it then started to become obsessive. And a lot of people struggle with this. It's like they get to their goal weight and then they're like, oh, it's 5 more pounds. Oh, it's 5 more
mhm,
pounds. Oh, it's 5 more pounds. And then they spend their whole life trying to chase the last quote unquote 5 pounds. But at some point, like your body's going to give out, your body's going to break, or you're going to lose your quality of life. And that's where a lot of people get so like tunnel vision
mhm,
that they forget that like if you're truly doing this for a lifestyle change, you want to make sure, are you living life, or is your whole entire life what you eat and what you and how and when your workout is?
mhm,
That to me is not life. once we finally find the balance in our eating habits and our bodies and our movement and all that stuff, the purpose of that is then now life opens up to us, but it doesn't have to be in those rigid and in those extremes. So trying to change like one of the things I say a lot is like, the second I decided to stop focusing on how I wanted to look and instead started to focus on how I wanted to feel, that's when I found balance in my eating habits. So where
Mhm.
you can start, I tend to talk a lot,
Oh, this
where
is
you
great.
can start is stop focusing so much on trying to change what you look like and instead trying to start focusing on how you want to feel.
Mhm.
And when you do that, you might not reach a certain, shape or size that you had originally anticipated or expected, but you probably will get to a place where you feel really confident in your body and in yourself internally and externally.
Mhm. I love that because that was a turning point for me of like I did hit that point of frustration of like I have to do something. I was like I don't feel good. I hate being in pictures like cropping yourself out of everybody's like your body out of every picture that you can. So it's like really hard for me to find pictures from them because I cropped them all.
Mhm.
Um and but when I did start for like looking for the weight loss and how I looked and how I felt. But then when I realized how good I felt, like that I felt good, I felt healthy, I felt strong, I felt confident. I was like, so now my weight doesn't matter so much.
Right.
I was like, that's I
You
mean, I
start to
weigh
detach. It's the numbers that gets us stuck a lot. The number of our pant size, the size of our clothes, the number on the scale. But if you really start to focus how you want to feel and you start to challenge that, like that matters as much.
Mhm.
And it's a lot more freeing.
Oh yeah. I'm like, and then I think it's also has like this educational side to it of like knowing how different foods make you feel.
100%. And that's where, as a registered dietitian, I talk about, and a lot of dietitians would agree with me, there's a saying like all foods fit, meaning there's no good or bad foods. Now, for someone who's used to dieting, they're like, what do you mean? Like,
Mhm.
of course there are good and bad foods. When I say there's no good or bad foods, I mean there's no foods that morally make you superior or inferior, depending on whether you ate them or not. So like you don't get a pat on the back, yeah, you ate your broccoli today, but you feel like crap because you didn't eat your broccoli today and you had a cookie instead. You want to try to disassociate that, right? When I say there's no good and bad foods, I'm not saying that a cookie is more nutritious than broccoli. We know that one has more nutritional quality than the other. We also know that it's not the cookie that's the issue. It's eating the entire box of cookies after you ignore your hunger cues all day, right? So it's understanding that it's like, how can I incorporate mostly nutrient dense foods because they make me feel good, while also making room for some of those things that maybe aren't as nutrient dense but they're exciting to my taste buds, or they connect me to my grandma when I make the cookies or whatever it is. And that's like one side of it. The second side is that everyone's bodies are physically different, so certain people can tolerate certain foods than others. Not everybody needs to be gluten-free to be healthy. However, if you notice that gluten really bothers you, especially if you have an allergy like celiac disease or a certain sensitivity, that you feel better when you don't consume it, then that's okay. Then do that because your body is talking to you. Your body is communicating with you, right? So it's really important to understand that if you're getting stuck in like that, my food needs to look a certain way and it can't be like this or can't be like that because that's what society said or that's what I read somewhere once. You really need to focus on like experimenting with yourself and really seeing how does your body react to certain foods and what works well for you and what doesn't. And that's how you begin to then figure out, your way, which I talk more about in my book of kind of figuring out like using the once upon a diet method, figuring out what works best for you and only you.
Yeah. Oh, that's so important. Like we're all different.
Yeah.
Like for you and I to stand next to each other, we look completely different in our physical builds. And we probably eat different too because our bodies have different needs.
Yeah, and
Like,
also our schedules are different, our
yeah.
family dynamics are different. Cultural backgrounds are probably different. Like there's just so many varieties. And even you can have someone from the same cultural background and the same schedule. And even within that, you're going to find differences.
Yeah. But yet we both can be healthy.
100%. Yep. There is not one way to be healthy. And if anybody tells you that, cut ties immediately.
I love that. Like healthy can look different. It
Yeah.
doesn't look
What's
one.
healthy is a perspective. For some people, the healthiest choice they can make is, believe it or not, a cheeseburger and french fries at a restaurant, because they might be so stuck in either an eating disorder or disordered eating habits where they and like, and then when I say that, they feel good and confident about their choice, versus like in the past they might feel really guilty about it, or they have that and then it leads to a binge when they get home. But what they realize is that, like, for example, at one point in my life I struggled with what's called orthorexia. It's like this obsession with healthy eating. So I would physically be full off of, let's say, like a carrot, like a tub of hummus and a bag of carrots, because in my head that was quote unquote healthy and that was acceptable. However, and then but then that never felt like it was enough. So I'd be physically full, but I would still go and eat, whatever in my head was okay. And I'd raid the cabinets and I'd be binging on quote unquote healthy options. Whereas if I probably just allowed myself to have, let's say, like a cheeseburger and fries and just be done with it,
Mhm.
that at that time in my life, that actually would have been a healthier choice for me. And
Mhm.
so that's why when we use the term healthy, so many people don't really even define it, or they just think it's just physical health, but your mental health needs to be a part of that equation, and you have to define what that looks like for you and let that kind of guide you in your way. Like, what are you currently working on, and is this a healthy choice for me right here right now based
Mhm.
on my goals and my values?
Mhm. I think that's so important. And I love that you're giving people freedom to have those foods that mean something to them. And like I talk about, I'm like, there are foods that fuel my body, and I try to mostly fuel my body with those foods, but there are also foods that like fuel my soul,
Yes.
that like that make
Yeah.
me happy. And
Yeah.
so yeah, like when you say no, I can never have the cookie, I can never have, like, I just want it. And same as you, like I will eat everything in the cupboard trying to
Mhm.
avoid eating that cookie, when if I had just had the cookie, I probably
Yeah.
would have been fine.
Totally. It's giving yourself permission and understanding that it's okay. And when you do that, you remove the shame spiral,
Mhm.
like, and the guilt that can come, and you give yourself permission, and you're not putting it on a pedestal anymore.
Mm,
So therefore it loses its, it's like if you tell a kid they can't do something, they want to only do it more, right? So like, you're just exposing yourself to it, you're allowing yourself it to be an option. And in the beginning, they're in the beginning, if especially if you come from years of restriction, at first that method you might really have all the cookies, because even though you're giving yourself permission, it's like you haven't given yourself permission in 10 years, so now you want to eat all of them. But if you allow yourself to have that every single day, eventually you're like, I would never get tired of it.
mhm.
You would understand that, like, you can have it every day, and therefore, and you actually don't want it today. And that's okay. Like, you'll start to make choices based on your intuition versus based on what you think you should do, or what everybody's telling you should do.
So you just mentioned like listening to your intuition. How do we, so like you said, like there are some people that have been restricting for years upon years, just restricting something different with each diet, and getting
Yeah.
into that new mindset of I can have these things and it's okay. How do we start to listen to our bodies? Because I think we don't listen to our hunger cues.
We definitely don't. Yeah,
No.
totally. Yeah, so I'm really glad you asked that, because one of the things you'll hear me say a lot, and I realize, especially with like social media, your audience could be literally thousands of people from all different stages of the journey. So you never really know exactly who you're talking to. But one of the things I usually say is part of being a mindful eater is, eating when you're hungry and stopping when you're full, and honoring your hunger and fullness cues. What I always forget to, realize, and I always have to, like, then I like do a follow-up post or something, is to say that if you come from years of dieting, or you live a very busy lifestyle or super stressed lifestyle, you probably are completely detached from your hunger. You don't even know what that it actually looks like or feels like. And so part of the process is actually getting back into a more of like a routine, or more of a just like encompassing like all foods. So really addressing your physical hunger, and making sure that, at first I don't believe in like rigidity, but at first you might have to really focus on having a balanced breakfast, a balanced lunch, a balanced dinner, some snacks in between, whatever your schedule looks like that works for you, and trying to eat around the same time each day so you can get to actually even understand what does hunger feel like? Because many people will say to me, well, I'm not hungry for breakfast. Well, then they come home and then they overeat on dinner. And then obviously you're not going to be hungry for breakfast because you just overate all night long and your body hasn't digested it quite yet, right? Or they might say, I'm not really hungry during the day. Well, maybe you're super busy running from A to Z and your body is either in fight or flight or rest and digest. There's no in between. So if you're running from A to Z, you're working a really high stress job or just, a parent or whatever it is, and you're constantly taking care of other people, you're not even allowing yourself to like sit down and like feel hunger, right?
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
once you actually, maybe take some big deep breaths or like, start to like set some boundaries and not, actually create space to feel it, you actually might actually start to feel it, but we're always stressed out. So part of it is like physically making sure you're eating enough, eating balanced enough, eating consistent enough, whether you're hungry or not, just sit down, have something, whatever. Um, and then the second part to that is definitely addressing our mental health and our mental well-being and what we call our psychological hunger,
Mm.
and creating space for maybe more meditation, more breathing, more journaling, just more downtime to regulate our nervous system. So that way it actually can communicate with us, because if we're running from A to Z, there's no time to feel anything. And so that's definitely part of the process. So it takes time. I feel like I'm throwing a lot at the audience right now.
No, but
It's not
it's
easy,
so
but it is
good.
very possible. And once you figure it out, it is incredibly freeing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I
one of the
love
other
that.
things to say really quickly that I'm not gonna I won't teach, but if you want tips on being able to utilize the hunger scale, that is also something that I educate people on. And so when they do start to sit down to assess how hungry they are, there is a way to kind of help you get closer to understanding what does hunger actually look like.
Yeah, no, that I think that's so important because we don't take time to like listen to our bodies, the cue like our body speaks to us all the time, but
Mhm.
we don't listen to it. And I was forced to listen to my body because of chronic illness. Like
Right. Well,
they're
that's
just,
what will happen. That
you know,
happened. So that I didn't get a chronic illness, which I know it can be really challenging. But I had SIBO and mono at the same time, so small intestinal bacterial overgrowth and mono. So I was like, when like the word exhaustion and like getting sick all the time, because basically my gut was a mess, so I wasn't absorbing any nutrients I was taking in, and then mono, basically you're just tired all the time, like so tired. So I had no choice but to just like literally sleep for like 20 hours a day. Like that's the only way I could heal. And then slowly coming out of that, like when I would start to exercise, I would get winded really quickly. Like I had to listen to my body. And it was, at the time, it felt like the worst thing ever, because like all of the progress I made in my, fitness and nutrition journey, it was just like dwindling away, because I used to exercise all the time. I couldn't exercise at all. Of course, your body's going to change, right? But it went from one extreme to the other. And I think that's where people really struggle, is where they think if they give up doing something that they're going to like kind of blow up or whatever it is. And it's like, no, if once you find the balance, actually, you're going to stop toying with the ups and the downs and all of those things. So, yeah, I think getting sick, it's really not fun at all. But however, I do find that it usually happens at the time when we need it the most, because it's usually trying to tell us something and we just ignore it. There's a saying like, listen to your body when it whispers so it doesn't scream, or something like that. That's like one of my favorite quotes. I definitely butchered it, but it's really important that we get it, because we only have one body and it's with us the rest of our lives. And it is trying to communicate with us, and so the sooner we can form a healthier relationship with it, the higher quality, more quality rich life you're going to have.
Mm, yeah. Um, I want to ask you, you did a post recently, and I want to ask you about this. And it had to do with body shaming and the BMI index and our obesity epidemic. Can you touch on that? Because I thought you had some really good points in your post about that.
Yeah. So listen, I always like, same thing with like when I said like there's no good or bad foods, that can be really triggering for people, because they're like, what do you mean? Like, Do we have an obesity epidemic? Honestly, I'm not sure, because the reason why I say that is because the obesity epidemic is based on the body mass index, the BMI standards, which all it does is take your height and your weight, divides it, and spits out a number. It doesn't take into account gender. It doesn't, I don't even think it doesn't even take into account your age. It's just for adults. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
Which could be like 18 to 65. Like, that's it.
Mhm. Yeah.
Before that, you're considered an adolescent. After that, you're considered a senior. Like, that's it. Um, so it doesn't take gender into account, doesn't take age into account, it just takes your height and your weight, divides it. So it doesn't take into account, is that weight coming from muscle mass, water, body fat, none of that. So that's why I just don't believe the numbers so much, because I know that there was times in my life, the one I just talked about, where I kept chasing that number to try to get out of the overweight category. And like, I finally hit it, but then I got sick with mono and SIBO at the same time, and it all went away. And I realized that at that moment, it was a pivotal moment for me, because I realized what I was doing was actually, I was going down a really bad path. I was about to develop the eating disorder that I basically had when I was in like a child. So for me to recognize that, for me, being in the quote unquote overweight category is actually healthiest for me and my body.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of people struggle with that, because we are all different shapes and different sizes. And in order for us to feel good in our bodies, that might mean that you might fall in the obesity category. But it truly is what's helpful for you, because if you go anything more than that, then an eating disorder happens, or you start losing your hair or stuff like that because you're malnourished. Like, that's not healthy. So excess body fat, yes. Does it lead to certain complications? Yes. Does it cause inflammation? Yes. However, everyone's body is different, and I think what we need to look at more is like our blood work is, do you have elevated blood sugars, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, those sorts of things, because that can happen at any body size and any shape and size. And that, what somebody looks like, just by looking at somebody or just taking their height and their weight and dividing it, that doesn't tell us anything about their lifestyle. It doesn't tell us anything about their habits, doesn't tell us anything about their mental health. It really doesn't even tell us much about their physical health. In the extreme cases, sure. If your BMI is under 18, you probably need to put on some weight. If your BMI is over 40, you probably need to lose some weight. Like, in those extreme cases, they're usually more obvious, but that can often also be like, we don't need a stupid BMI calculator that is based on a math equation that doesn't even make sense to tell us that,
Yeah.
right? I gave the example the other day. I was talking with a client, like The Rock, you guys know The Rock, he's
Mhm.
amazing.
Yeah.
I'm pretty positive if we calculated his BMI, they'd put him in like obese class 2. Like,
Mhm.
I'm pretty sure he's also like in really great shape and takes care of himself really well.
Yeah.
So, there's so many ways you can spin it, but yeah, so I'm not a big fan of that. It also doesn't help us, because there's that associated, because of fat phobia and a culture we grew up in. It just makes us feel bad and shameful, which doesn't lead to anywhere helpful. So I just don't think that it's a helpful tool to use.
Yeah, I love your explanation of that, because like for myself, like I have struggled with that of like I've spent a lot of my life in the overweight category on the BMI. The only
Mhm.
time I was in the what's considered healthy for me, my mom told me I looked anorexic, and I
Mm.
was very sick at the time. I wasn't actually trying to be, I was below where I wanted to be.
But that's also a really great example. Like, unfortunately, like, you weren't healthy at that point. You were very sick. I'm assuming it was from your chronic illness.
Yeah.
That would
Yeah.
make, yeah. So it was your chronic illness. There's people who take medications that either make them lose weight or gain weight. There's people that could be like cancer. It unfortunately can happen. They need to, take chemo or radiation. Now they're losing all this weight because they can't eat. That's not healthy, right? That's clearly not healthy. Or someone who takes a medication for their depression and out makes them gain a little bit of weight, but it's better than them having suicidal thoughts. Like, this is real stuff that people, I feel like I'm going over on time, but I feel like this is important to talk about, because I didn't get a chance to record it on my podcast, which I really want to do. I'm going to keep names out, but I was having a conversation with someone who was telling me that she lost 40 pounds since, like, this was in 2 months. That to me sounds like a lot of weight in 2 months. And I was like, oh, how, I don't comment on people's bodies. This was not like a client. This was just like a friend of a friend. I was at an event, came talk to me about it. I was like, oh, what are you doing differently? Because she heard I was a dietitian. So that always is like, oh, can you help me with this? What you might care about this? I actually don't care. And no, I can't help you. I'm at a party. But anyways, so she told me that she said that she started taking Ozempic, which is really popular right now. It's a weight loss medication that's usually, it's really what it was originally created for people with type 2 diabetes to help regulate blood sugars. And now people are taking it for weight loss. And there's a bunch of different types of them. And I've read about the research and the studies, and I've heard from other people, but I've never had a physical conversation with someone that I knew was taking it. And I haven't heard anything great. I've only heard really not great things. And she was like, oh yeah. She's like, yeah, no, I lost 40 pounds. I was been doing Ozempic. I was like, how do you feel? She's like shit. Excuse me. I was like, oh, she's like, yeah, no, I had to pull over to throw up because I couldn't keep my food down on my way here. But I lost 40 pounds.
Oh.
Like, I always keep like a blank face but in that moment, all I could think about is this really what we've come to? Like, you're okay with throwing up your food, you're okay with not eating and feeling like crap as long as you look a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that is not healthy.
Yeah.
That is disordered. That is, just because it's normal in our world and in our society does not make it normal and okay. Like, that is not okay. If you're willing to, plus the side effects of it can cause like liver damage and all these different issues, and you're willing to do that just because you want to look better and get compliments for how you look or feel better, but you don't feel better, you just look different.
Yeah.
That's not good.
Yeah. No,
That's all
I feel bad for her that like she doesn't get to feel good. Like it shouldn't work that way. Like you're right. Like that's not healthy. So like just kind of my last question for you. So I mean, I've been frustrated by the BMI for like so long. Like had my own relationship with it, frustrated with the scale for so long, had my relationship there. And I'm at a point where those two numbers, they're there and I'm aware of them, but like, they're not my driving force because I weigh more than my goal weight and I feel the best I've ever felt.
There you go.
And I'm in the overweight category. And I can tell you, like, I don't look overweight. I don't feel overweight. Like I'm 43 and I am the healthiest and feel the best I have in my entire life. So for the people who are like, well, what are my options if BMI isn't a good indicator, scale isn't necessarily a good indicator, what should I be looking at?
That's really great. So I always like to when we work with clients, we really focus on your habits. And then so looking at and almost like thinking of them in categories, and then really just trying to find your balance within all of those different categories. And then whatever you end up looking like and feeling like, chances are it's going to be something you feel really good in and proud of. But so it's first looking at your habits. So we look at like your nutrition, eating 3 balanced meals a day. I think obviously nutrition's like super complex and we can go into that a lot, but like, not feeling guilty or eating certain foods, making sure you're nourishing your body and getting enough of your food that you need physically, but also like psychologically, not being afraid to eat certain things. And then, creating food freedom. That's like the hardest one. That's why I have a 6-month program on it, because it takes a long time to achieve food freedom. But you're looking at, your nutrition is a big pillar. So finding balance within that, your exercise, you still want to move your body regularly, and working on, building your strength, just like overall health, right? To just physically move your body, but finding what that looks like for you. That your workout, not every workout you need to break a sweat, right? Not every workout needs to be an hour for it to count. But also like working out one day a week and then not, or going to the gym every single day for a week and then not working out for 3 weeks. You gotta work on the balance there. It definitely needs to be something that works for you. And that, once again, that can be unique in your own way. For some people, they love, like dancing or um, taking classes or working out at home, like figuring out what that looks like for you, but being consistent with it. I would say across all of these is if you're consistent in all of these categories, that means you have healthy habits in all of these categories. So your nutrition, your exercise, hydration is really important. Making sure that's something I feel like it either is like you're doing really well, or you're not doing good at all. Like I'm sort of middle with that for whatever reason. Stress management is a really big pillar as well. So making sure you have built-in habits. So for some of you that might be meditating, for some of you that might be journaling, for some of you that might be talk therapy, going for walks in nature, whatever that looks like for you. And then the last one is your sleep, which is probably the most important thing because people underestimate when we sleep, have a good night's sleep. Oh my God, we just make better choices for ourselves. We have more energy for our workouts. We're less likely to crave, salty, sugary foods. We don't, calories are a unit for energy. So if we're sleep deprived, our body's going to look for energy. So you're just making things harder on yourself. It helps us to like manage our stress better. So sleep or like that's really important. So making sure you're working on like a good sleep routine, your quality of your sleep, I think matters actually more than quantity, although I think quantity is important. Quality I think is more important. So focus on that. And that's notice how I actually didn't say supplements, right? But supplements might be something that once you have those things that, for example, as you get older, sleep tends to be a little bit harder, especially people who are in like the perimenopausal, menopausal phase. So you might need to have certain supplements to kind of help with that stuff. But first focus on your habits and then maybe look for the shiny little cherry on top that can help aid in that.
I love that because I'm also a stress management coach and those are my pillars as well. Like the
I
exact.
love that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, and that's the thing, people overcomplicate things so much, but it doesn't have to be complicated. Just keep it basic and then like build on that. And so many people try to go so hard so fast and then they burn out, but like just start with one and then notice that like that will trickle into the other. And then now you're feeling really good and you have the confidence, you can do a little bit more. And it's a really great, it can be a really awesome life. It can be really great.
It can.
You
It
got to
can.
work on it a little bit.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And you have a gift for our audience. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so just so you guys, so this is my book. It's called Once Upon a Diet. This is not the gift. However, in this book, I talk about the parallels between dieting, dating, and romantic relationships. And I talk a lot about like the Disney princesses and kind of how they were our golden standard of what we thought we should look like. And I created a quiz that goes alongside that so you can figure out which Disney princess you eat like. So if you go to my website, tipswithtoni.com, it's on the homepage. You can go take that quiz. It'll help you to understand which Disney princess you eat like. And then it will obviously then give you tips to to teach you how to utilize those character traits of those Disney princesses in a way that is helpful to you rather than hurtful to you.
I love it. I'm gonna have to go take the quiz. I'm gonna find out
Yeah,
which.
it's fun. It's really fun. I love it.
Well, thank you so much. This has been so helpful. You've given some great tips and just like they're foundational things. Like
Yeah.
they're not nothing, like you said, it's not the big shiny cherry on top. It's the foundational simple things that we need to work on.
Yeah, and that is the case with even so many things in life. Work on your foundation and you'll be able to thrive after that.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great one to end on. So thank you, Toni. Thank you to our audience. Go check out her quiz and find out which Disney princess you eat like and get some tips on that. I'm going to go do it and find out who I get. And thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Have a great day, everybody.